What's happening is when you go in there and you're doing this, I mean, there's a question as to how effective this is and how necessary it is. In fact, one of the another doctor, actually not Mustapha, was being investigated for performing over 500 of what they considered unnecessary arthrectomies.
Wow.
So again, this is a procedure that, maybe needs to happen in these extreme cases, but it makes a lot of money. And so the doctors are saying, hey, let's do this. And they're doing it multiple times, just several months apart.
On the same person.
On the same person.
Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome back, everyone. Another episode, Prioritizing Profits, Dangerous Drug and Product Cases.
You have got that down now.
I do have it written down here as well, just in case.
Very smooth. We
have had a few outtakes where I've messed it up in the past, but now I got it memorized. I'm ready. Probably good for me to know the name of the show that I've been on and helped run for the last few months now.
That's helpful.
Back with another week. Feeling pretty good. Feeling good. This week was okay. It was pretty consistent. How are you doing?
Good. We had some kind of craziness here in Tucson, just weather-wise. We had Monday, just like this insane monsoon, but not just monsoon, because when you say monsoon, you think just really heavy rains.
Yeah.
But we had this unbelievable hailstorm. I mean, just these huge hunks of ice coming down. Mm-hmm. It was like 110 degrees, and then all of a sudden there's ice pouring out of the sky.
Yeah.
So that was... And actually, it ended up, I had plans to go out to dinner that evening, actually with the attorney that I meet for mentoring. And it was funny because she had called me and said, hey, it's raining kind of hard. Do you still want to meet? And I was like, yeah, it's rain. I mean, we're good. Yeah. And then there was like this warning that popped up on my cell phone, and it said that it was, life-threatening and serious, and don't travel unless you're evacuating. And I was
God.
Well, holy shit, I guess maybe.
It's a real deal.
I know. I said it's a real deal. And, it didn't look that bad out here, but I mean, especially because going down like River Road, and then the next day it was just all washed out. So certainly between getting here and getting there could have been dangerous. So we had to postpone, but.
Yeah, middle of July. Hailstorm, 100 degrees out. I mean, I think we broke records in Arizona for hottest week, like above 110 consistently. And then in that same week, there's a hailstorm. I mean, the world's ending. I'm pretty confident we're on the verge of it within this lifetime. All
right, maybe not within my lifetime. I'm on the.
You're lucky.
The other end.
You're lucky. I'm going to be here to witness the whole thing.
This is the world I've left for you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks. Generation before. I mean, you guys lived a good life, and here we are cleaning it all up.
Yeah, I suspect it's because I did not get an electric vehicle.
Other than that, though, how's future looking? How are we doing?
Things are good. I'm actually kind of excited. Speaking of weather, we are getting ready to head up to Flagstaff tomorrow for a long weekend. And we wanted to get out of town, and the reason that we decided to go to Flagstaff is just because we need to hike. And when I say need to hike, we need to hike.
It's a necessity.
Well, it's a necessity. And so at the beginning of the year, I decided to commit to this thing called the 52 Hike Challenge. And so it's a challenge to get in 52 hikes during the year, which
I kind of assumed that that's the type of challenge it was, or that's what you needed to do.
Well, that being said, I have seen, there's a Facebook group and everything, and you post your hikes and what number hike you're on and everything. But that being said, I have seen some people who are just finishing up their 52 hikes like from 2 years ago. So I don't know. But I feel compelled, being kind of the type A that I am and always have been, to knock out these 52 hikes in the 1 year. And we were doing great, we're doing great. And then we got a few in Tasmania, of course, where it was cool. And then we were like, oh, come on, we're not wusses. We've lived here a long time. We're good. And we would get up at like 6 in the morning in Sonoyta. And Sonoyta is 10 degrees cooler than Tucson, which is 10 degrees cooler than Phoenix.
So it's like 100 degrees.
Yeah, pretty much. So it's like 100 degrees. But we get up at 6 in the morning. We're like, okay, we're going to be fine. We just get up early enough. And we went out and we hiked with our dogs. And I mean, it was the trail we took was not shady enough for one thing. But anyway, I mean, it was just blasting hot. And I mean, the dogs are like running ahead just to find some shade and, stand in the shade,
Yeah.
looking at us like, what the hell? This is torment. And, and we're lugging, tons and tons of water and enough water for us, enough water for the dogs. And then finally we were just like, this is ridiculous. So we're either going to have to hike like multiple times a week when the fall comes around eventually, or get the heck out of town. So
Yeah, travel for those hikes. And that makes sense. I mean, you're going to Flagstaff this weekend, so I'm assuming you're going to try to bust out a hike a day.
Well, yeah. So we're going tomorrow afternoon. So we really have Friday and Saturday to hike. Yeah. So maybe we can cram on 2 per day.
How far in are you out of the 52?
I think we're like 25 or 26. So we're not bad.
Yeah, about halfway.
I mean, at the beginning, we were getting all, I mean, we were very ambitious. And so we were getting a couple in a week.
Wow.
On the weekends, if we're down in Sonoyta, it's pretty easy to do that. But then, see, the other thing, too, is that we could be right on track. I mean, technically, they require a hike has to be at least a mile. But to me, a mile is not a hike.
Yeah, that's light work. That's
like a dog walk.
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
like in a suburban neighborhood. It's kind of
toddler. Toddler could waddle his way through a mile hike. That's nothing.
Well, and then sometimes we've been in town and we've walked, several miles, but it just feels like a hike. In my mind, is you go kind of out of town, you're kind of in somewhat of the wilds, and you hike for multiple miles.
No, you should be wearing
a pack with hiking boots.
I was gonna say hiking boots as a requirement.
I know.
Yeah.
I think the accessories.
And also, it can't be paved. I don't think.
I agree.
If there's any pavement, then it's not a hike. You're just kind of taking a stroll down a structured kind of alley, structured path.
Yeah.
There should be a fear of wild animals being on the path, snakes, mountain lions, bobcats. I mean, if there's
risk,
there has to be a risk, because I mean, if you're just like walking to QT down the street, hey, it's a mile technically, but I wouldn't call that a hike in any way.
Yeah, well, you see, those are my thoughts exactly. And so that's why we feel like we need to take a road trip to some place where it's a little cooler.
Yeah.
Although I did just look at the weather yesterday, and it's still like 89.
That's not bad. I mean,
well, it's not bad. And also I figure like 89 is like the peak of the day, and we'll still get up early. We'll get up, I'm probably not going to do the 6 o'clock thing we were trying to do here, but 7, 8 is probably going to be, 70s, 80s. I don't know. I'm guessing.
And it'll be good for Bauer. I mean, that dog's got a few pounds to lose.
Hey,
He's got a few pounds.
Okay.
I know he's gone through his trials and tribulations, but look, we've gotten past him.
What if he's listening?
I hope he is. This should be motivation. He should be listening to this, looking down, checking himself out, maybe walk into the bathroom, take a look in the mirror and say, this guy's right. I got to go on these hikes a little bit more.
I'm feeling very protective of poor B-Boy.
He's a fantastic dog. He is. He's great. But
he has lost some weight. But I mean, to be fair, he was on steroids for a very serious medical issue for a while, and so he bulked up a little bit. It
was a dirty bulk. It was a very dirty bulk, but here he is. He's leaning out.
Yeah. It's competition season. I don't know.
Exactly. And now he's bigger and better than ever. He's on that path.
Yeah. All right. I think we've redeemed if he's listening.
Yeah. Well, so
we love you, boy. We do.
52 hikes in a year. I mean, it's quite a few. I don't even know what that averages out to on a weekly basis. But being
one a week.
Oh, is that? Oh, good. Well,
because there's 52
weeks
in a year.
That's kind of embarrassing. I didn't know that. I kind of exposed myself there.
We are not editing that out. Oh, no, do not edit that out.
Well, so obviously one hike a week. So you guys got to make up for a few going on these trips. Are you thinking going down the line? I mean, it's only July now. And on the path that we're at, temperature-wise, it's not going to get better anytime soon.
Well, yeah. So we're going to have to hit it really hard when it does cool off. But like I said, at the beginning of the year, we were doing two a week instead of one a week because, we were down there for the weekend, sometimes 3.
3. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys are just pumping them out.
Yeah. So we're going to do it. We're going to catch up. We're not going to be pushing this into I mean, not to give people a hard time. I mean, because, everybody has different abilities and time commitments and all sorts of things. So I understand that not everybody can do one a week or average one a week, but, we don't have any real good excuses.
We get it. There's people that can and can't, but look, we're better than you because we're getting one in a week. That's all we're saying over here.
Okay, that's not what I'm saying. No. And you're not even doing it, so what the hell?
Not at all, but I can kind of just ride off the coattails over here. Showered family. Look, the showered family is doing 52 hikes a year, okay?
Yeah, well, we're gonna. Yeah, I think we're gonna knock them out. And like I said, we don't really have any good excuses not to. We've got a slightly chubby canine apparently, who needs.
I can't really talk much. Bruno's got some stubby little legs. I don't think he could make a quarter of a mile, let alone a full mile.
Well, I can actually tell you that he can't, and even if
just confidently, there's no shot.
Well, so we've actually tested this theory, and when we would dog sit for him, we used to try to take him on just the loop down in Sonoyta, and I mean he would get. And then he was making some real efforts. This was a couple of years ago. At this point, he'd just stick his nose up and be like, forget it. Yeah. But he would make it maybe a quarter of the way, and then we'd end up carrying him. And he's a small dog, but he's really solid.
Oh, no, he's very thick, and he's sturdy. Very sturdy, low to the ground. I mean, look, he can't go long distances, but you're not knocking that dog over.
No, the wind's not going to blow him over. He's like a brick. And so, of course, then I would make Peter carry him the rest of the way.
But he's pretty carryable. I've gotten used to just hucking him over my shoulder like a bag of potatoes.
Yeah,
and just,
a rucksack.
And he understands it. He likes it up there. He's like, wow, this is what life is, not being half a foot off the ground.
Well, and it was good for Peter too, because it's kind of like rucking. You put that extra weight on. It's helping him as well. It's true. A harder workout, and
Bruno's a team player.
Exactly. Does what he can. So.
All right. Well, getting on to the main subject at hand. Interesting cases in the week. How are we feeling? Anything that may shock people?
Well, yeah. The main thing that I wanted to talk about, which is actually was a front page story on the New York Times, at least the weekend edition, which is the one I get. And it involves doctors and drug and device companies behaving badly. Imagine that if you can.
That sounds like kind of the whole reason we have this show, actually.
I was going to say, it's right up our alley. Yeah. Not necessarily doctors all the time, but the drug companies. And this is a situation really involving doctors and drug companies, and some of the problems that have historically occurred. Laws have been passed in 2010, I should say. I didn't know exactly when, but laws have been passed which limit, compensation and what drug companies can pay to doctors, kind of to encourage them to use their products, their medications, that sort of thing. Back in the day, that wasn't the case. Anyway, there are definitely rules in place, and but you always kind of hear these stories because there's loopholes, ways to get around things, that sort of thing. And so this involves a procedure called an arthrectomy. And this is a procedure that is used if somebody has peripheral artery disease. And this is apparently about 12 million Americans suffer from this condition.
Oh, yeah, I kind of, with the big words there, it sounded like something that would be very, not many, small percentage. 12 million, I'm assuming that's a small percentage. It sounds like a shit ton of people.
Yeah, it's a fair number of people, though.
Okay.
And what it is it's where plaque can build up in your arteries the arteries of your legs, and then that can affect your blood flow. And of course, you don't want your blood flow to any appendages being affected, because ultimately that could lead to amputations, which of course, we want to avoid at all costs. Anyway, so this procedure, an arthrectomy, is something that they do purportedly, or in certain cases, it does help. And it's basically they send this wire into the arteries with a tiny blade or laser, and they're basically hacking away at that plaque that's building up.
Yeah, okay.
I know, it sounds really...
No, this sounds gruesome and terrifying.
Yeah.
You're putting a blade slash laser into your arteries. I mean, that's like some futuristic stuff right there.
It is. It is. But apparently, in some extreme circumstances, that does help. However, there are a lot of circumstances where something this dramatic is not necessary, and people can exercise more. There are medications that can help. Quitting smoking, certain lifestyle changes can significantly reduce the risk.
Yeah.
However, some things kind of all came into play that made it very lucrative for doctors to perform a whole lot of these.
Yeah.
And so what happened is back in 2008, Medicare started encouraging doctors to perform certain procedures outside of hospitals. So in these ambulatory surgical centers or outpatient clinics.
Their basements.
Well,
back rooms.
Why do you always come up with these things? When you say it, I'm like, okay, yeah. This is Medicare. It's the government.
The government. Anyways.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. So anyway, and of course, the reason for that was that hospital admissions it's just so expensive to go in the hospital.
Yeah.
And then you're going to probably stay overnight and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it's very, very expensive. Mm-hmm. So a lot of procedures, Medicare was encouraging doctors, if these are things that can be done outside of the hospital, let's do it that way. And in 2011, they started paying for outpatient arthrectomies. Okay. So these, basically a lot of these procedures, it's big bucks for the doctors.
Yeah.
And now the hospital's not taking a big chunk of the fee. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to get most of it. Then on top of that, the drug companies start encouraging the doctors to open up their own clinics and purchase the equipment to do these. And so then they're going to get to keep all of it.
And so this seems like it's not just the drug company, it's also Medicare incentivizing it.
Well, Medicare is incentivized. So a lot of procedures really can safely be done outside of the hospital. In fact, Peter now is doing a fair number of procedures at an ambulatory care center because some of these more minor things, you just don't need to be in the hospital.
And when you say
ambulatory care.
Yeah, I mean, I'm imagining like a whole setup in an ambulance.
No, ambulatory means like you can ambulate, you can walk. Oh. So it's basically like you walk in, you walk out.
I was going to say it's like a food truck, you call them out, they pull up, hey, come on. Oh, you got some plaque in your arteries? Yeah, we'll just stick that right in there.
Well, maybe you probably got their plaque in your arteries because you ate at the food truck in the first place. This could be a very good business.
Let's not talk down on food trucks. They're fantastic
establishments. Some of them are good. Some of them are good. So anyway, there's nothing wrong with doing some of these procedures. I mean, it's a waste of resources because there are people who really need to be in the hospital, mm-hmm. and you're taking up beds on these, relatively minor procedures that don't have to be done there. So it makes sense, that part does, but the problem is, can it be taken advantage of? Yeah. And is it being taken advantage of? And I think that in this situation was a golden opportunity, apparently. So what started happening is these doctors wanted to set up their own clinics, and of course you're going to have to borrow a fair amount of money to purchase this expensive equipment, the space, and all of that. So now the drug companies jump in and they're like, whoa, we will loan you the money.
Oh, you need $1 here too?
You need $500,000?
We got you.
We got you.
Yeah.
Okay. So the device company now loans the money mm-hmm. to the physician's practice, right? They open this up. And now, whose products do you think they're going to use?
They have to. I mean, I'm assuming there's probably part of the deal, like, hey, we'll loan you this money, but you got to fill up your building with our stuff.
Right. And so, and all of these, I mean, there's a lot of, you use the products for each procedure. You have the big machines, of course, but then there's also, all of the products that you use for each procedure. Mm-hmm. And so, they're expecting that you're going to use their products. Not only that, there was one of the companies who apparently was telling the doctors, hey, if you need to use a certain number per month, you don't even have to make that loan payment.
Well, I was going to say, first of all, the idea of doctors taking out loans from pharmaceutical companies or for pharmaceutical device companies, mm-hmm. either way, that is an insane idea. I can't even imagine how that's legal or how that's allowed. Like, there is obviously some type of incentivization, just issue there. And then also you're using their devices that you have to pay them for. So they're loaning you money that you then give back to them so you can get their devices.
Right. Now, and to be fair, and if you read the whole article, it goes into the details that, of course, the drug company has this separate entity that's their loan company.
Nice.
Again, it's really pretty clear what's happening here.
Yeah.
And there are definitely investigations going on. And so the article talks about some of the really crazy situations with some of the doctors, and they're saying that apparently half of the Medicare payments annually go out to 200 top providers. So there's 200 doctors over the country, and half of all of the payments are going to these people. So they have like these basically high volume shops set up.
Yeah.
It's not that doctors are just doing one here or there. And one of the stories they were talking about was this Dr. Mustapha, who calls himself the leg saver.
I thought it was going to have something to do with Lion King.
I think that's Mufasa.
Okay.
Mustapha.
Kind of close enough there.
Yeah, so he calls himself the leg saver, not the Lion King, but
Okay, the leg saver.
The leg saver. But unfortunately, a lot of people have lost legs, and so what he was doing was doing these procedures, one after the other, sometimes two at a time. Some past employees were saying. Two at a time.
How is that even?
Well, you can set up two
side by side.
Apparently,
they're like, hey, the patients are both on the tables, are right next to each other. Oh, hey, what's up? How you doing today? Oh, I'm doing great.
Okay, well, I'm assuming that they're unconscious. Yeah, one would hope.
That makes sense.
So, and apparently, well, I say apparently a lot. I'm stopping that. I've been called out on that on social media, so I'm not going to say that.
I think it's hard to say because as a lawyer,
Well, you want to hedge, and hey, I'm not. Basically, I'm giving you the facts that I have collected here. It's not opinion, and and a lot of the cases that a lot of these things are allegations.
Yeah, exactly.
Have not been proven yet, and so I certainly don't want to get in trouble. But allegedly, I guess, maybe alleged is better than apparent. But anyway, allegedly, actually, this would be more factual. He worked for a company prior to starting his own practice, and in the 4 years that he worked there, he only did 358 arthrectomies. So then, in the next 4 years, he does 1,500.
Nice.
And his partner does 1,150. And that comes to about $18 million from Medicare. And this is just from Medicare. It's not from, so if any of his patients had private insurance, that's not something that was tracked here because Medicare is investigating. And so they know what they paid out. But there may be millions and millions more with private insurance. Many of those patients probably have private insurance.
How is this not like a Medicare problem? Like, how is Medicare not?
Well, they are.
Okay,
so they're investigating.
Good. Yeah.
And so that's what's bringing a lot of this up. And part of the investigation involves talking to, we're looking at some of the patients who've had to go to the emergency room following these procedures. And like 8 different surgeons all came up and testified about this particular doctor's patients, how they had to come in on an emergency basis and deal with the problems that have been caused and perform a number of amputations from the leg saver. Yeah. What? So because what's happening is when you go in there and you're doing this, there's a question as to how effective this is and how necessary it is. In fact, one of the another doctor, actually not Mustapha, was being investigated for performing over 500 of what they considered unnecessary arthrectomies.
Wow.
So again, this is a procedure that, maybe needs to happen in these extreme cases, but it makes a lot of money. And so the doctors are saying, hey, let's do this. And they're doing it multiple times, just several months apart.
On the same person.
On the same person.
That's insane.
Again and again and again, telling them we need to do this because this is how you're going to save your leg. But what happens is you go in there and you cause all this inflammation, and you can actually damage those arteries.
I'm sure. There's a blade/laser going through.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, I don't know the details on how fast this plaque builds up or anything along those lines, but
Allegedly.
But it appears, at least as part of the investigation, they believe that a lot of these were unnecessary and were basically done simply because they were going to make money doing it. And these poor patients, not only, I mean, some of them have had this horrible result of losing a leg at the end of the time, but even if they don't, they're still going through this awful procedure time after time after time. I mean, how awful.
It's terrifying. I mean, surgery in general is terrifying, but especially something like this. And, even it being explained to me on a third-party perspective, I can't imagine that. But being in a doctor's office, me like, hey, there's going to be a blade going through your arteries right now. We got to do it. It's life or death, or you're going to lose a leg. I mean, it feels like you're in a corner. There's nothing that you can do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, these patients are victims, basically.
Yeah.
Even the ones who have not lost a leg, I mean, they still have undergone horrible procedures that they didn't have to undergo and maybe caused more damage, that ultimately is going to,
And so
outcomes.
are these patients suing the pharmaceutical company? Are they suing the doctors? Who's responsible for this? Because it seems like it's kind of like a tag team 50-50 deal where the doctors are knowingly doing this, but they're also being incentivized to do this by the pharmaceutical company.
Well, so the story is primarily about the investigation that Medicare is looking into.
Yeah.
So it's a federal investigation, which isn't necessarily a lawsuit per se, or at least not a private lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they are found guilty or not, if it's determined that they actually did perform unnecessary procedures, and that would be Medicare fraud, because they're billing for procedures that didn't need to happen. So they could have to pay some significant fines. But then you take the individual patients, and those individual patients who have suffered injury have a claim.
Yeah.
But then whether they go out and get an attorney to pursue that claim, is a separate issue. If they do that, then I mean, with these doctors, they have it's a malpractice claim if they're performing unnecessary surgeries, and there may be a claim as well against the pharmaceutical companies. So those would be case by case situations, depending on the doctor and the circumstances and how involved the device company was in the particular situation.
And so, I mean, you mentioned this small nugget here, but that it would be Medicare fraud and they would have to pay fines. I mean, is this not something that is like a massive? I mean, they're essentially stealing millions of government money, right?
Oh, yeah.
How is that not criminal? How is that not something where you could be going to prison?
Well, it is criminal. It is, I mean, it's basically the white collar crime. In fact, in the story, they talk about this CSI, which is one of the companies.
Love that show.
God. I didn't even catch that one. Yeah. Anyway, this is one of the device companies. I don't know actually what it stands for, but it's not crime scene investigation. I'm pretty confident of that. But apparently they had to. Damn it! I saved that.
No, it's okay. You
right. So, according to the story, they paid $8 million in 2016 to settle a federal investigation about illegal kickbacks. And so kickbacks are a little bit different technically, but another thing that's illegal kind of goes along the lines with what you were saying. They've been reined in significantly in more recent years because now anything that the drug companies or device companies pay out to doctors is public knowledge and has to be reported. I mean, it's a lot harder to get away with things that they used to do.
And I know this has kind of gone into as well pharmaceutical reps, because now you don't make commission on selling any of these devices or drugs. Is that correct?
I actually don't. I mean, I don't know that there's an issue about a commission.
I think from what I've heard, pretty sure, because what's that one show that you recommended with the.
Oh, the Dope Sick.
Dope Sick, yeah. And then all the pharmaceutical reps are making massive money because every sale that they do is is they're getting a kickback from, essentially.
Well, so that wouldn't necessarily, but that wouldn't be a kickback per se. A kickback is where like the doctor gets paid for using the medication.
Oh, yeah.
That would be, a sales incentive, a commission, something along those lines. And I'll double check on that because that's an area that I don't know the details on. But what I can tell you is that they can't they can promote their drugs, but they have to do it fairly. They can't, take the doctors out to fancy dinners any longer. They can't, pay for their vacations and things like that. So there was a lot of that going on. Then that is definitely illegal, and they can't do that.
Well, and you mentioned in the previous case with the kickbacks, they got fined $8 million. You said,
right?
That's pennies.
Right. Well, exactly. And it kind of goes to the same thing we talk about with some of these lawsuits where they pay, millions of dollars for killing people. But to them, that's pennies considering how many billions of dollars they made selling the drug or the product.
Yeah,
so it's very similar.
That's like probably one weekend for all the doctors that they've been spending money on, right? They're buying flights, buying these trips, expensive dinners. I mean, for these, obviously, I'd love $8 million. That'd be big. But for these pharmaceutical companies, it's not.
Yeah, it's not big for them. And it's, it has changed. And I mean, I can attest just from being married to a doctor that it's definitely changed. At this point, for example, Peter can go out to dinner with these reps. However, they have to be talking about business. And for example, I've attended some of these dinners, and literally we have to pay them exactly what it costs for my food, my beverages, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, the drug company is not going to, they were very strict about that at this point.
Good.
I mean, it used to be, you could take your wives, your girlfriends, both,
Yeah, mistress.
And the wife, take them all, have multiple rooms, and these fabulous vacations. And so now they can have doctors speak at conferences or provide education, but it really gets looked at very strictly.
That's good.
But, for example, when we went to San Diego, remember we were there because Peter went out to actually be trained how to use a particular device.
Yeah.
So they could pay for his travel to go and learn how to use their device. But that's not to say, it's very specific devices that's appropriate, is it not? They couldn't pay for, certainly my travel. They couldn't, basically nothing else. It's very, very, very strict.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's good. Obviously, this is a great example of how the incentivization can take a bad turn very quickly.
Yeah. It's very scary. And it's just unfortunate because, when you're talking about like the drug reps, especially when there are, say, multiple medications for the same condition, and one drug rep is the one who's picking up your dry cleaning and bringing, and sending you on vacations and doing all of this kind of stuff. But the other medication is actually better for the patient or has fewer risks. Yeah. Very problematic. Yeah. And doctors say, well, that does not affect my decision making, but there have been studies done, where they say, oh yeah, actually look, you look at the numbers, it did. Even if they thought that it wasn't affecting them, they actually did prescribe more of that medication. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something that from an outside perspective, you can be like, because there's a lot of trust with doctors and with the medical industry overall. Oftentimes it's kind of blind trust, and so you think in your head, well, their job is to care as best as they can for their patients. And I'm sure, like you said, in their minds, they are trying to do that, but subconsciously or maybe knowingly in a lot of cases, that's just not the case. If it seems like a very small difference, but hey, you get a few vacations on a year and some nice dinners and dry cleaning, then.
Well, and there's always going to be the bad apples, there's going to be the doctors who truly believe that they're doing absolutely the best thing for their patient. And then there's going to be the others who are like, hey, I can make a quick buck here or a quick 18 million. But it's just, the things where you hear these stories about these totally unnecessary surgeries. In fact, we were at a conference a few years ago, and there was this crazy case that happened it was in a hospital in New Mexico, and it was particularly of interest to Peter because it involved pacemakers. And so there was, and again, those are, it's a expensive procedure, relatively low risk, but there are risks, and literally every single, not everyone, but so many patients who went into the emergency room. They had back pain, they had a sprained ankle, they had a car accident.
Pacemaker, baby.
Yeah, they were leaving with pacemakers.
That's
I mean,
insane.
they would be like, "Oh, well, gee, look, I've noticed this on on your EKG, and this, and the next thing you know, they've got a pacemaker, and the doctor's making tons of money." And so, lots of people there ended up having unnecessary pacemakers.
So insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really, really sad. And again, that's kind of a crazy story. It doesn't happen all the time, hopefully. But the hospital and the physician got sued, both of them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the device rep was involved in that or not.
Well, I feel like something like the pacemaker too. I mean, you get a sprained ankle and they're like, "Oh, let's run an EKG just to be safe." A pacemaker, that's a pretty big deal. That's something that's I would imagine is hard to convince and hard to like fake to get that device in. But clearly, people will find a way if they are inappropriately
in
incentivized.
an emergent situation and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, really, that's something that, you should have a Peter take a look at and tell you if you need a pacemaker. So, I mean, unfortunately it happens. And it's a good thing when these investigations happen and, you want to ask questions. You want to get second opinions.
I was going to say, if someone is worried about this happening to them or it is happening, what do they do? Because I feel like these concepts are so hard to understand. I know if I went in there and the doctor told me I'd have heart issues and I needed a pacemaker, like it's hard for me to look at the same studies and be like, is it necessary? I don't know. I just trust the
Right.
authoritative figure telling me that it is.
Right. Well, I think getting a second opinion is really key.
Yeah.
And again, those are usually not emergency situations, which is why Peter rarely gets called in on the weekends, which is a nice thing for us. But they are usually situations where you can ask questions, get another opinion, research your doctor, see if there's lawsuits against your doctor. And that would kind of go to these arthrectomies. Again, this is not an emergency. This is a situation where they're saying, "Oh, we should do these every few months, blah, blah, blah." And at this point, somebody's going to research this guy, and he has not lost his license to date, as at the time of this article.
Yeah.
But, you would then get the information that these allegations have been made, these are the concerns, he's being investigated, and perhaps speak with another doctor.
And what's the pharmaceutical company that's
A lot.
engaging with
Actually,
this?
there are several, but I think it's Philips was a big one in this. Philips and this CSI. Yeah.
Wow. Well, those are ones to keep an eye out for. You got some shady business going on from them. It's like 3M, right?
Well, yeah.
Always something going on with those guys as well.
Well, they do have a lot of products, that's for sure. So anyway, get second opinions, research. We actually have had, especially when we did primarily our advertising locally, we used to have people call us pretty often just saying, "Hey, we know that you do these types of cases. I'm getting ready to have, this device.
Yeah.
Is that something that you know about?" And honestly, whether we knew about it or not, we knew where to research it.
Yeah.
Whether you could look to see if there were adverse events. And so we would help people, kind of get that figured out.
That makes sense. I mean, I would say that's probably a great idea with hernia mesh, which is so common these days. I know you're talking about a lot of cases coming in.
Yeah.
If I had a hernia and someone recommended hernia mesh before I got on that table, I'd 100% call and be like, "Hey, this is the brand that they're using. This is the material in it. Am I good to go, or is this something that's gonna cause some issues down the line?"
Well, and just asking other questions too, like, is there an alternative to the mesh? And then of the meshes, again, do you have a relationship with the company that makes this mesh?
Well, I mean, but that's the thing is that you can ask the doctor, but I feel like in these situations, even if those patients ask the doctors those exact same questions, whatever they may be, they're not going to answer it truthfully. They're already doing something that's unfaithful to their...
Well, not necessarily. I mean, so a doctor who is implanting a hernia mesh isn't necessarily doing anything bad.
No, well, I'm saying if in these cases, where the doctors are clearly giving them surgeries and procedures that are unnecessary, even if you're asking those questions.
Yeah, no, those situations, you have a bad doctor, that's going to happen. But I mean, if it's a doctor and say you're using a particular hernia mesh or you need a knee replacement and they're recommending, this brand, you certainly can say, well, you could research and see if there's been issues with that one. Ask if there's an option to, if that doctor will implant a different one. I mean, some doctors are, those are the ones I'm using, and that might be questionable too if they won't consider any others. I mean, they may have a preference, a comfort level, that sort of thing. That's valid.
But they may not know. There's a lot of these cases where they just aren't aware of it until there's serious issues. And even once there are serious issues, there's a variety of other things that they're looking into. They have a ton of different conditions and patients. It's hard to always know, what the risks are for every procedure, for every material or product that you use.
Yeah, well, actually, and that's kind of a funny or not so funny story, but back in the whole days of the transvaginal mesh cases, I remember talking to a physician who I knew socially about those, and she was just like, oh, that's just a bunch of crap. It's all the lawyers. If you know what you're doing, you don't have problems. And I know what I'm doing.
Jeez.
Right. Well, and that was a number of years ago. She's not doing them anymore, And so, there's just a lot of different attitudes, especially when these issues start coming up. There can be physicians who think, because, and again, the drug companies are probably saying that too. They're saying, hey, this is a good product. Lawyers are crazy. This is the gold standard. This is what you're using. You're doing fine. Have you had patients with problems? And the funny thing was that I'm like looking through my medical records. I'm like, oh, yep, she did have a problem.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, she did. I mean, Tucson's a small town. And so I know for a fact that she had patients that did have issues with it.
I wonder if that's like something that plays a role too is, ego in the field.
Well, doctors' egos? What?
That's what I was saying.
Doctors don't have egos. They're not gods.
Obviously, we don't like to generalize fields. Lawyers already get a bad rap, and so not everyone
so unfair.
That has a medical degree or is a doctor or surgeon has an ego. Peter is one of the least people,
I know.
Very humble, but I'm sure, in such a respectable, hardworking field like that, there's got to be a few people with some egos, and I'm sure that plays a role into some of these cases and some of these situations.
Yeah, definitely. And then ultimately, when it turns out that there is a confirmed issue with a product or the product gets recalled, the doctors feel terrible.
Sure.
When again, they put in the product that they believed was a good product, and now they're having to remove it, and have these patients go through these, just grueling, miserable treatments or surgeries to correct the problem. That's very humbling too, you might imagine. Especially in, this came up a lot for us with the hip implant and knee implant cases, because those are, orthopedic surgeons, first of all, they're like the carpenters of the medical world. They've got their hammers and
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, well, they are. And they go in there and they fix something and they send you away and they don't expect to see you for 10 or 20 years.
Yeah.
Fixed, done. I don't need to have a bedside manner. It's not like somebody who you're coming back for pain pills and this and that.
Yeah.
And, it's just the constant, chronic condition. Problem fixed, bye.
Yeah.
And now it was like problem fixed. Whoa, you're back.
Holy shit, it's even worse now.
Yeah, and now you're worse than you were.
Yeah.
So those were some. I saw some doctors who were pretty devastated by that because they had just kind of been on this high for their careers, like basically fixing people.
Yeah.
And now they had actually hurt people. Not through their fault.
Yeah, unknowingly.
But with the product. Yeah.
Being a part of a process that was just set up by nefarious organizations.
Nefarious. We need CSI on the scene.
It's been my new word recently.
I like it.
So that, that's a very interesting case, and I think it does kind of touch on a lot of subjects that we talk about in every podcast and every show with every drug. It has everything kind of playing together. So I wouldn't say it's rare, but it is kind of unique where it's both the pharmaceutical company as well as some bad apples. possible malpractice.
Well, that's why you need lawyers to take care of the bad apples, to pluck them.
Exactly.
Pluck them and bake them in a pie.
So what else? What else interesting cases?
Well, a couple of updates on cases, and one is on the Johnson & Johnson talc. We've talked quite a bit about that, but there was a verdict that came out in one of the trials on Tuesday, and it was a California case. A very young man, a 24-year-old man who had used talc and was diagnosed with mesothelioma. And the jury found that it was caused by the talc and awarded him $18.8 million.
Well, what can we? I mean, I've heard of mesothelioma before, but for other people that may not, obviously I know it all. But
well, so actually, what we're going to talk about next week is mesothelioma. So we'll get into a lot of details on that on the next podcast. But basically, the talc being inhaled into his lungs caused him, this it's basically a lung disease, but it kills you.
Really?
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
And so, in fact, what they are, he was diagnosed in early 2022, and they're expecting that, as they say, he's not going to live much longer. They don't.
Jesus.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
when he
it's
gets 18
fatal. It's always fatal. And it's
18
very
mil,
miserable.
and you don't even get to
No,
ball out
18.8, so almost 19 million. So the thing about this, though, is that if you recall, we talked about the whole bankruptcy scam they tried to pull where, where they tried to put, some assets and basically all of the talc claims into this subsidiary called LTL, and then it filed bankruptcy. So that the Third Circuit kicked that out, said that was not okay. They've now filed a second bankruptcy with more money in LTL, and that is before the bankruptcy court to decide whether or not the judge, whether or not she wants to uphold that. It could then get appealed to the Third Circuit again. But in the interim, so this verdict has happened. The jury said, yeah, J&J, yes, your talc did cause this guy to have mesothelioma and is going to die. But he's not going to get paid. This is going to, this will be on hold until that. So literally, he's never going to see any of this money is the reality of it.
So insane. And what you're kind of touching on, too, is that now it is official that there is a direct connection in a case.
Well, the jury found that.
Yeah.
So, again, what is official? The jury believed the evidence that was presented. J&J always puts on experts that say that it's not related, and the plaintiff puts on experts that say that it is. This jury was convinced and outraged enough to award a huge number. And there have been a lot of juries. There are a lot of verdicts out there, against J&J. Now there have been some losses too.
Yeah.
So it's not. It's not official. It's this jury's decision.
And it's so frustrating to hear that they're trying this bankruptcy scheme again, because it isn't just the same situation, but they threw a little extra few million in there, and they're like, hey, instead of fining us officially, just take this.
Well, it's 8.9 billion, and so it's a lot more than it was the original time, eight times as much. So they're putting a lot more money in. But the thing that bothers me about it is that, why not just come up with a global settlement then? Why go through the bankruptcy court? Companies put large amounts of money into these global settlements all the time. It doesn't have to go through the bankruptcy court. So, there are certain reasons why they want to do that, it sounds like, and certain protections that you're going to get that you wouldn't necessarily have in a regular settlement. But it just still feels scammy to me.
Yeah.
And so, that being said, there are a number of claimants who say, well, that's a lot of money. We're willing to work with that. Let's let that go. So I think either if this doesn't go forward, perhaps they will try to transition that into a global settlement.
Yeah. And I can't help but think all of these little grimy cut corner things that they're doing around this situation. And again, kind of taking a step back to previous episodes with the talc cases, they were literally pouring in canisters that had the cross and bones on them. And J&J is Johnson & Johnson, the same company that did the vaccines for COVID. I'm not saying there's a direct correlation. Vaccines, whatever, to each their own.
They do a lot of things. They do baby shampoo, and they do everything.
But it's just knowing that an organization that has a history of doing something so clearly bad and just very nefarious It's
Wow.
it's just
Well
kinda-
used. Well used.
Yeah, it's just concerning. That's all I'm saying. It's a little scary.
Well, it is concerning. That's what we're here. That's what we're here about, is because there's all of these concerning things, and people should know about them. And this, so the bankruptcy judge is saying that she's going to rule on, at least at her level, whether this can go forward by the end of August, or no, actually by early August. So we will definitely come back to this and see what's happening in that. And I mean, we have a number of talc clients, and actually one. A deceased client with mesothelioma from this. So, I mean, we're very, very interested to know what's going to happen here. And I mean, the issue is you want these people to be fairly compensated. And this is a company that the fact that they could just throw $8.9 billion into something, they have the money to pay these people for the harm that they've caused them, and they need to.
And the idea of fairly compensation, what is fair? This guy that you're talking about,
a 24-year-old guy who's going to die.
And he's not even going to see the money.
No.
And I mean, yeah, it's a good chunk of money for us, but if they got billions of dollars, 19 million is nothing in that.
Well, I mean, can you imagine his family? I mean, he's 24 years younger than you. I mean,
That's true. That is true.
I mean, there's no amount of money that could compensate me if, something like that happened to you.
Yeah. Even $1 billion?
No.
Yeah.
Hell no.
That's fair. I mean, $1 billion's a lot of money, though.
Nope. Okay. Not even 8.9.
Wow. Okay.
Not even if they gave it all.
I appreciate that.
Okay. You're feeling the love.
Yeah, that means a lot. Wow.
I mean, how would I do this podcast without you?
You could with that type of money, you could hire Joe Rogan if you wanted
that's
to.
Probably.
You could get that guy over here for that type of money.
I don't know. He's not as cute. Not as good on the camera. All right. Well, enough of that.
And you did give a little sneak peek. So next week we're talking about mesothelioma as well.
Yeah. So mesothelioma. So the classic case with the talc has been the uterine cancer, because women used it, gynecologically,
Yeah.
And so, but the cases involving the men are generally where, if they were concerned about sweat, they were putting it on their chest, and so then they were inhaling it into their lungs. But mesothelioma, you see a lot of those cases from workplace asbestos, and oftentimes exposures in various industries, industrial chemicals, different types
Coal mines.
Yeah.
That's when I
so
think.
Yeah.
When I think of lung issues, I always think of
Oh my
mines
gosh.
and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, on a quick aside, I don't think I told you, we went to Bisbee on Saturday just for a little day trip. Or was it Sunday? I don't know. We went to, it was Sunday. Anyway, it's like a big mining town, historically a mining town. But unfortunately, I can't take a tour of the mine because Peter's very claustrophobic. But we did tour the museum there, and man, I mean, it's those conditions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrifying.
Insane, especially like way back in the day too, where the mine shafts that took you all the way down were incredibly rickety. You're just body to body with people. There's no good ventilation. There's
the canary.
Yeah. Once, which is insane. The canary, you hang out there, and then once a canary dies, you're like, okay, wow, now
Time to go.
A living animal just died next to me. I guess this is a sign I got to get out of here.
Well, and then they would have like the collapse. They would get stuck down there, and I can't even.
I can't go into mines either. I don't blame Peter. I mean, I'm not even that claustrophobic. It's just the idea of being that far underground.
Underground is very terrifying.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen YouTube videos of people that do like cave exploring.
Oh yeah, that's spelunking stuff.
Yeah, where they go, through holes that they barely can fit in. They have to control their breathing, and I mean, it is insane.
No, I have no appeal.
My God, I watch those videos and they give me anxiety, and it's just it's just interesting to see. I'm like, wow, there's people that thoroughly enjoy this, and they're much better than me, just in every way, because that's impressive.
Crazy, yeah, not something for me.
So that's what we're talking about next week.
Yes. And so I have some other updates maybe we'll touch on next week, because we still have a little bit of time here. The topic on cases that we are currently taking is the barred power port. I think we talked about it briefly last week. But these are really kind of happening right now. There's actually been a petition filed to consolidate them into a multi-district litigation. And so you probably are seeing some advertisements and that sort of thing for them. But it's a pretty nasty situation, as are most of these things. But the barred power port is a port catheter device, and it's used to deliver medications. Most often it's used like for chemotherapy, so where you're going to be putting in IV medications on a regular basis and you don't want to put the needle in every time. They'll actually implant a port so that they can just tap into that. And so these are things that are pretty commonly used, but this one is really problematic. And the problem with it is that the material that the catheter portion is made out of. And apparently, see, that is like my favorite word.
Oh, it's something like you said. There's a reason behind it.
Okay.
Allegedly.
Well, allegedly, the polyurethane material is not good. It breaks down much more quickly than other products, and so it can then fracture and migrate, which causes damage. Also, as it kind of starts to degrade, and through the production process, the surface is somewhat uneven, and so there's like little divots and grooves and pits and things like that, and
Jesus.
and so when that's implanted, it's a good place for infections to start, where something they kind of like seize onto the onto the device.
So they're going into veins, as like you said, in chemotherapy most commonly, so they don't have to keep poking. They just leave it in there.
Well, so it's usually implanted in the chest, and I actually took a couple of pictures because I knew that you were going to wonder about this. So I'm going to just
maybe throw them to Fern too.
So you can kind of see. So it's the actual thing is underneath the skin, and then the catheter goes into the vein. So then they can just puncture right into that port.
And so it's in the vein that it's deteriorating, and pieces of it are kind of going through your bloodstream?
Well, the catheter part. So the port is there, right? Yeah. So that's that kind of square part.
Yeah.
And then it's attached to the catheter that goes into your vein, and it goes into whatever vein you're
And so the catheter, which is the little wire thing that goes into the tube.
And so that's what is fracturing.
Yeah.
And so and if it fractures, it can actually damage your vascular system. The problems are like the infections. People are getting sepsis, thrombosis. So that's where like a blood clot would form around or inside the power port. Fractures, and then part of the port breaks off, which can cause injury to your heart or lungs. And then migration, where it moves from its original position, and that can lead to tearing of the vein.
God, see, this is like the thought of anything that is problematic with going into your vein. I mean, in my mind, veins are just very fragile, tiny, obviously important aspects of the body and human biology.
It's carrying your blood. It's something we need.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's so tiny too. I mean, it's a vein. Already, when I get needles inserted, when I have like an infusion or something like that, I am terrified to move my arm because I'm like, what's
going on inside there?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, already having something like that on your chest that's just there 24/7, and then whenever you need to go in. I mean, it makes things easier, right?
Right. And you're not blowing out your veins and that sort of thing. So, I mean, the idea of it's good. It's just this particular one is problematic because of the material that they used, and that the manufacturing defect and also the design defect with the actual material. And these things, again, here we go with the usual story. These things came out in 2000. And all of a sudden, they're getting a lot of adverse event reports, more so than would happen for a similar product. And again, it's because of the problematic material here. And rather than do something about it, they just continue to promote them, to sell them, to use them, and until the numbers start piling up, and then the lawsuits start, and then people are actually looking at these and saying, what is the problem, and figuring it out. So apparently, That is my favorite word. But hey, I'm onto it now. I'm onto it now. So there have been a number of lawsuits that have been filed around the country, and the petition has been filed. So there are enough of these things, and we expect that they will continue, that this will probably be a pretty significant litigation. And, again, problems happen. People may have had this port. I mean, again, it's been out since 2000, so we've got quite a few years there. People may have had this and had problems, but not known that the product was defective. Well, things happen. But, now we know that there is an actual problem. We understand why more problems are happening with this one than other ports.
Yeah, I mean, this is something where it's almost like a middleman. It's not actually what... For example, like with devices, there's a knee replacement. It is the device that is the main primary reason that you're going into surgery that's causing a problem.
Right.
Hernia mesh, you're going in, you have a hernia, the mesh is there to support it. If you have a problem, then it's kind of easy to assume. But the power ports, I'm assuming that there's a variety of different reasons that you'd have something like that installed.
Yeah.
And so it's like I said, it's a middleman to actually get the medication.
Get the medication, it's also used like for people who have feeding tubes. I mean, it's anything where you've got to get something in on a regular basis. But the most common use is for chemotherapy. And I mean, here you are, you're already dealing with, this horrible situation. You've been diagnosed with cancer. I mean, chemotherapy is just a horrendous thing to go through in the first place. But the medication is hopefully going to save your life. And then the method of its delivery is a problem. I think that's what you're getting at. It's not the chemotherapy. It's, just the way it gets there. And there are other ports that could be used.
But that's a thing too, is that, with the hernia mesh, it's kind of not easy, but it's a little bit easier to be like, okay, this is the device I'm getting. Is there any other options? When you're getting chemotherapy, you're not thinking, oh, is there something wrong with the port? Is there even options with the port? I didn't even know this was a thing, first of all, and that there's a bunch of other options is completely separate as well. I had no idea.
Well, I mean, with anything where you can make money on them and you're going to use them a lot because there's a lot of uses for ports. There's going to be multiple companies making them that are competing. And, this one's newer and better and this one's easier to use or blah, blah, blah. So there's always going to be a variety of these. But there are a lot of these out there and they've been causing problems for a good long time. So I think this is going to be a pretty big litigation.
Yeah. So how would someone know if they got a barred power port? Because I know with the devices you have the stickers, which aren't really stickers anymore. They're more online, or not online, but on. Yeah,
so because it's an implantable port, it is going to be. We will definitely be able to find out. Yeah. The individual person isn't going to know, just like they don't know what kind of hernia mesh they have. Mm-hmm. The issue is, did I have a port? Did I have a problem? And if so, then you should talk to an attorney, and we can get the records and we can find out what port it is and we can find out what the problem was. Yeah. But yeah, if you had either an infection. Or a perforation, a migration, a fracture. Yeah. Absolutely, that's worth looking at.
I feel like any issue, because I mean, these are things that if I was, if I had chemotherapy and then there's an issue after that, I would think in my head, like, is this the chemotherapy causing this? I mean, it's hard, I would imagine, for someone that's going through this to even make that connection in any way.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, it's going to be an issue, a mechanical issue, where the thing fractures, it maybe migrates, it causes some damage. It's not going to be like, well, I'm nauseated or...
Yeah, that's fair. That makes sense.
Some things that would clearly be more related to the chemotherapy. But yeah, if you had some complication, with any port, I mean, again, you don't know what port it is. I mean, if you had an issue with your port, and lots of times, I've heard many stories about people having infections with those. And of course, there may be an infection that has nothing to do with the port itself, but worth getting that checked out. Mm-hmm.
And so that's now cases that we're taking.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the newer cases out there. And yeah.
Has it been consolidated yet?
No. So there's been a petition filed requesting consolidation. And so we will certainly update again if and when that happens. I mean, it probably will. I know that they are objecting to it at this point.
They always do.
Well, they don't always. Actually, every once in a while, they want them to be consolidated too because it's easier for them as well. But, again, if they're claiming that there's no problem.
Then they usually do. So. It's always my go-to question whenever there's a new case. Consolidation is kind of a good idea of what stage it's at.
Well, it's where things really get moving, and it's where you see like a lot of cases get filed. It's And then, you see a lot of the advertisements, and so people learn about it because a lot of people would have no idea. Again, somebody, went through chemotherapy a few years ago. They had, a horrible infection from their port, but they have no idea that there would be a lawsuit about that. I mean, anytime you go to the hospital, they're always going to say, one of the risks is infection. I mean, really, one of the risks of living is infection. There's always a risk of infection.
Yeah.
And so you just think, well, it's just one of those things. I had shitty luck. It happened. Not that it was caused by this particular product.
Yeah, or more likely because of this product. Yeah. And like I said, I mean, just the fact that it's a middleman between whatever medication.
It's like a delivery system.
Yeah, the delivery system.
That shouldn't be a problem. I mean, maybe the medication should be a problem, but just getting it in there, and now we've got to, that's causing the problem.
It's like the most basic thing is like the delivery system. You got to get medication into your body. It's the last thing you'd assume it has nothing to do with the medication. Your problems. It's something completely different.
Yeah. So that's the kind of the hot case of the day, and I know we are getting kind of close to. We're actually over an hour. So
it's all right. I mean, let's go into what's going on next week.
Well, so what's going on next week is we are going to talk about the mesothelioma cases and whatever else is happening. I do want to give an update next week on the hair relaxers. And actually possibly on the infant formula. Man, we need to do more than one a week. There's a lot of things happening.
Yeah, a lot of updates. Well, it's good to have too much than not enough.
Well, that's true. But definitely send us questions because we're still short on questions.
Yeah, and you can send us questions everywhere. I mean, we got Facebook, we got Instagram, we got TikTok, wherever you're seeing it. You can throw it on the comments, but also know, there's probably a lot of people out there that have issues or have questions, and when it comes to medical conditions or surgeries, whatever it is, it can be uncomfortable to put that out in the public, so feel free to anonymously reach out to us, throw it in the DMs on Facebook, on TikTok, whatever it is. You can always email us at sjshoward.
Well, not my personal one. How about info@showeredlaw.com?
Info@showeredlaw.
Yeah, or podcast@showeredlaw.com. That one's a good one too.
Yeah.
So. Well, and the other thing too that we were talking in our meeting the other day is like anything you want to ask a lawyer, because if it's not something we do, I know somebody who does it. We'll get an answer for you. So just ask a lawyer. Here we are.
I know. I always see the channels of lawyers that talk about what to do if you're pulled over, or the very unique, specific niche questions. But that's one of the perks that we have is that you have so much experience in the field of law, and you can understand it. That if even if you don't
I know people,
and if you don't know the answer, you can ask around.
I mean, it may not be something that I've done, but enough to get you an answer. I know people, and we'd love to discuss it. Maybe we learn something too. That's always fun.
Yeah, I mean, I learn something new every show. To be fair,
absolutely, good deal.
Alrighty, well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Another fantastic week, another fantastic show. I had a great time. I hope everyone tunes in next week. We got some very interesting topics. If you have any questions, like I said, reach out on all those social media platforms, anything you like. But with that being said, I hope we have a great week.
Have a good week, and we'll chat about my hikes.
Yeah. Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
dangerous drug and product cases.